Hello everybody, I'm Sara Talathi from Vishwakam Institute of Technology and today I'm here to talk about data modeling. Yes, data modeling. A data model is a collection of conceptual tools for describing data relationships, data semantics, and consistency constraints. In simple terms, data models define how the logical structure of a database is modeled, and that is data models defines how data is connected to each other and how they are processed and stored inside the system. It also gives categories of data models are them. High level or conceptual data models provide concepts that are close to the way many users perceive data, whereas low level or physical data models provide concepts that describes the details of how the data is stored in the computer. Next is entity relationship model. So entity relationship model, or you can call it as ER model, is based on the notion of real world entities and relationships among them. While formulating real world scenarios into database model, the ER model creates entity set, relationship set, generally attributes, and constraints. ER model are the best used for conceptual design of a database. They are based on attributes, the relation among them, and also the entity relationship diagram is basically a structure which is portrayed as a diagram that is also called as ER modeling. Next, why to use ER diagrams? It helps you to define terms related to entities. It provides a preview of how all your tables should connect. Also describe entities, attributes, relationships. ER diagram are translatable into relational tables. Database designers as a blueprint. Also, ER diagram allows you to communicate with logical structure of the database to the user. ER diagram, the database designer gains a better understanding of the information to be contained in the database with the help of the ER diagram. This is ER diagram, the flow. So we have entity, an attribute, and a relationship. The entity could be a weak entity also. Attribute are of four types: key, composite, multi-value, derived. Relation is one to one, one to many, many to one, many to many, and now we'll learn all of this in detail. So first, before starting with the entity, attribute, and relationship, let's know how it is actual the drawn. What are the symbols? So as you can see over here, the entity is in the rectangular form. Over here, it is also written. This entity relationship diagram represents the entity type. Then, if we want to show if it is a big entity, we draw double triangle, rectangle to it. Attributes are always in double ellipse. It is in ellipse, and multi-valued are in double ellipse, and diamond shape is to represent the relationship between the entity and the attribute, and there could be a weak relationship too. So double diamonds are drawn, and here is the dotted ellipse because it shows it is a derived entity. It links the attributes to entity types and entity types with other relationship types. And attributes are always underlined. The attributes which are underlined are called as primary key. Next, we'll know now what the ER diagram model is about. So, as I said, ER diagram is divided into entity, attributes, and relationship. So, they have created so over here you can see entity basically can be a person, place, an object, event, or a concept about which the data is to be maintained. Like a car or a student is a entity. The attributes of it are like properties or characters of an entity, like the color of the car, name of the student, are the entities, are the attributes. And relationship could be the blue car belongs to the student Jack. It's a relationship like that. Next, let us know what is entity first. So, entity in an ER model is a real world object. An entity can be a thing or an object in real world distinguishable from all other objects. For example, each person in an enterprise is an entity. Each entity has attributes that particularly properties that describes it, or attributes are descriptive properties possessed by each members of the entity set. For example, an employee is an entity may be described by an employee name, age, address, salary, and job. So here the employee is the entity, and whereas the attributes is his name, his or her name, age, address, salary, job are his and attributes. Next is weak entity. So an entity that depends on the other entity is called as a weak entity. So basically over here, if we see the loan is an entity, whereas installment is a weak entity. So installment depends upon the loan. The loan cannot depend upon the installment, right? So it is, that's why it is, the weak entity is always shown in double rectangle, whereas the entity is shown in the singular rectangle. Next is this is an example of weak entity. So here we are able to see that the building BA apartment. So BA is like basically a weak relationship. So apartment BA building, the arrow is shown. So apartment has attributes like door number and floor, and door number is basically an primary key. So primary key is the one which is distinguishing between the other door numbers. BA is the weak relationship between them, and the entity which we are having is building number, name, address. Building number is a primary key. So basically, if you see, if you have the building, then only you are able to locate an apartment. So apartment becomes a weak entity where building has to be a strong entity. Next is what is distinguished between the strong entity and weak entity. As I said, strong entity is in the single rectangle, which is used to represent a strong entity set, and double rectangle is used to represent the weak entity set. Strong entity is contains sufficient attributes to form its primary key, whereas weak entity does not. A diamond symbol is used for the relationship of to represent a relationship that exists between the two strong entity sets, whereas double diamond symbol is used to represent of identifying the relationship that exists between the strong and weak entity. As we saw the earlier example about the building and the apartment, you were able to see that if building was the strong entity and apartment was the weak entity, and the relationship between them was also drawn in the triangle with double triangle with the diamond to show that it is a big relationship. Also, single line is used to represent connection between the strong entity, and to show double line is to show the weak entity. And total participation may or may not exist in relationship. Total participation always existing in identifying the relationship. Next is total and partial participation. What does it mean? So basically, a total participation, each entity is involved in a relationship. Total participation is represented by double lines. So over here, you can see we have entity over here with also an entity over here, which are joined by the relationship. But there are two types of line drawn here. The double lines are drawn, and here is the single line drawn. So double is known as total participation, and single is known as the partial participation, where not all the entities are involved, but in the total participation all the entities are involved. Let's check an example, three examples over here. So basically, a student has enrolled in a course. So student is connected with double lines to a relationship because it is including all the entities, whereas course is only partial. Here, employee works for department. Here, all the attribute entities are joined to the workforce, and over here, employee is then manages the department. Here is the partial one. Here is the double one, like the total participation one. So over here you can are able to see that one is written. That basically means there is only one to one connection. As I told, and basically the ER diagram was divided into three part. That was relationship, entity, and attributes. After that, the relationship contained one to one, many to one to many, many to one. So here one to one, like each employer manages one department only. This is that the example. We further also I'll explain you in detail, but here is it. So an entity set is a set of entities of the same type that share the same properties or attributes. The set of all persons who are customers at a given bank, for example, can be defined as the entity set customer. The individual entities that constitute a set are said to be the extension of the entity set. Thus, all the individual bank customer are the extension of the entity set customer. This is basically telling you what the entity set is all about. So next we learn about the attribute. The attribute is used to describe the property of an entity. So let's take an example. We have a student. So name, we are the attributes which are required, like the details of the student will require name, the ID, age, the phone number are the attributes of it. Next is what is key attribute. Basically, a key attribute is like a primary key. To represent, it is represented by an ellipse with a text underline. So over here, as I said, the student had attributes like name, age, phone number, ID, and ID is then underlined because it is a primary key. Because name can be same, phone number could be similar, and age could vary. So ID is the only differentiating thing where the student is getting differentiated. That's why it is called as a primary key, and it's a key attribute. The next attributes which we are learning are simple and composite. Simple attribute can't be divided any further. For example, we are taking student department name. It is also called as atomic value. The composite attribute, it is possibly to take breakdown composite attribute. For example, a student's full name may be the further divided into first name, second name, and last name. So student is the entity, address is the attribute, house number, street, and pin are the attribute to the attributes. So here's the example of the student. Next we is derived attribute. This type of attribute does not include in the physical database. However, their values are derived from the other attributes present in the database. For example, let's take an example of employee. Employee has attributes like employee name, employee number, the date of joining, and has an experience. The experience is the derived attribute because it is not fixed. Maybe a worker is working from 1 year or 2 year. Next is multi-valued attribute. Multi-valued attribute can have more than one values. For example, a student can have more than one mobile number, email, and etc. So let's suppose students has attributes like roll number, age, mobile number, and email ID. The roll number is a primary key, and other things like email ID and mobile number and the mobile number are the uh, multi-valued attributes. So here is the student example having multiple attributes and where it is connected with the relationship of address, and address also having many other attributes. So yes, next is about the types of keys. So the keys we will be learning in the next session, upcoming sessions. So thank you.